Sabah al-Khair, good morning dear listeners. You're listening to Radio 3CR on 855 AM and Palestine Remembered with Robert Martin, Nasser Mashni and Yusuf Ahmed al-Rimawi.
Palestine Remembered is Australia's only English-language radio program that is totally dedicated to Palestine. We'd like to welcome those listening on 855 and those that will join us on podcast at 3cr.org.au.
Thanks for joining us. Stay with us and enjoy the episode.
Good morning, listeners. We're joined by Yael, community organiser of the Australian Jewish Democratic Society and a dear friend of the show. Yael, how are you?
Well, thank you. How are you?
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us. Yael, can you start by telling us a little bit about your story? You're a Melbourne girl.
I was born in Melbourne.
You don't have to tell us the year, but a couple of decades ago.
I've stopped being asked for ID now, so that'll tell you how old I am. No, I was born in Melbourne, but I spent kind of the first 5 years or so of my life growing up in Israel, and then moved back here. I could say a lot of things about my story. I've done a lot of different things. So,
well, why don't you take us first? What took your parents back to Israel? Grew up Jewish, and was it a family connection to go back there?
My parents moved to Israel after they got married. Sometime after they got married, they lived there for 16 years. I guess their reasons were quite Zionistic to move there, but there's been some kind of family relationships. My father's mother was born in Palestine.
You were there for only 5 years. Do you remember anything? Whereabouts did you live?
In Beersheba.
Okay.
I don't remember much at all.
Sorry. It's beautiful down there. Back here as a young kid, Mum and Dad come back together?
Yes.
And you grow up in still a Zionist household, or?
Yeah, very much so.
So your education is in one of the schools, or is it a more broadly Western education? I
went to a local public primary school and I went to a Jewish high school.
Okay. And I ask these questions, Yael, because I've got quite a few Jewish friends. Sadly, most of them don't share our politics, but that doesn't mean I can't be friends with them. The occasions that we talk about politics, we talk about the school system and their kids going to the school, and often many of them talk to me about the fact that they'd like their kids not to go to the schools, Bialik and Mount Scopus, etc., and prefer them to have a more rounded education, if you will, or more exposure outside of Jewish school. But it's almost impossible not to. Is that something you've sort of felt, or your parents?
Impossible not to go to a Jewish school? Or
so sort of it's a societal pressure. The expectation is, well, of course.
Yeah, no, that definitely wasn't the case with my family. I mean, I have 3 older brothers who all went to Melbourne High. So for them, a kind of there was a few factors. One of them was around wanting to send me to a more academic school. So,
okay,
yeah, I think that there's various experiences in the Jewish community. There's also kind of I think a lot of assumptions around that everyone in the Jewish community can afford to send,
of course,
their children to these private schools, which are quite expensive, as you know.
No, they're very expensive. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you went all the way through year 12 there?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what happened?
And then I guess kind of moved quite far away from the Jewish community.
You guess, or do you know?
I ran away. Well, yeah, I think when I say that, I think that there's kind of maybe ideas of what that means. And for me, what that means is that I didn't run away from my Judaism, but I wasn't very interested in that kind of community and in the kind of Mount Scopus community that I was in high school. I was really keen to get away with it. So, I knew a lot of people in high school that just maintained those friendships, and like you say, like it was very insular. I did the opposite, and I made, I went and did a lot of different things. I was got involved in activism already in high school, so I guess got more and more into
What was the first?
activism.
What was the first thing you got active about?
The first thing I got active about was Pauline Hanson.
Okay, wow, yeah.
That might also tell you how old I am.
Well, she's had 3 cracks at us, so it could have been.
This is true. This was the first round. Yeah, that was it. And then I kind of did the rounds, I guess, of various. Joined a socialist group. I was very active in Jabiluka campaign, anti-uranium mining campaign.
So 5 years in Israel, quite a Zionist sort of family, and now you're at the Australian Jewish Democratic Society. So your evolution is complete. Tell us a bit about AJDS.
AJDS is I see it as a community activist organisation. It's been, I think, 35 years now, or 36 years. It's been around for a long time. It started, so I think that the important thing to say about it is that it's a multi-platform kind of organisation. So we talk about a variety of social justice issues, and quite naturally for us as a Jewish organisation, that includes Israel-Palestine. But throughout the years we've done various kind of activist work on refugee issues and decolonisation, Indigenous sovereignty, and a variety of other. So the AJDS tagline is a Jewish voice among progressives and a progressive voice among Jews, and I think that summarises it, who we are quite perfectly, in that we do we do work in the Jewish community. We are a member organisation of the Jewish Community Council of Victoria, and so we have advocated around the same-sex marriage and kind of sexuality issues within the Jewish community.
And I say that conversation to there, Yael, because the reality is, it's so easy for you to be typecast as a Jewish activist or community organisation, and so necessarily you only talk about Israel-Palestine, where in fact for greater than 30 years, this has been one action, but amongst a plethora of other activities.
Yeah, absolutely right.
You're currently employed by the Australian Jewish Democratic Society.
Yep.
How do people find you, AJDS? Give us a plug.
Me or AJDS?
No. Well, they're watching. They'll be listening to this show and downloading it. So you're bound to get abused.
We get all of the different kind of responses and reactions, really.
But the website is ajds.org.au?
Correct, yeah.
If people just search AJDS on Facebook, they'll be able to easily connect.
Yeah, we're on Facebook. Look, I think we have a very interesting relationship with the kind of Jewish Zionist community here.
Well, describe interesting. Is it mild tolerance? Is it hostility?
Yeah, I find it a little bit of a dance. So there's mixed. Some people outright hate us. We have been called race traitors and this kind of thing. But I think we do a very good job of holding kind of respectful conversations about things. So one example is that last year, and I think you were there, so we held a Jewish community forum about BDS. And BDS is kind of, the most controversial issue in the Jewish community if you want to talk about Israel-Palestine. But we went about it we held it, we were really focused on having this as a conversation in the Jewish community. And so we did have other people attending as well, but it was quite a well-attended event, and there was different people from the Jewish community that came. And we held it as a conversation. So instead of it being a confronting like dogmatic or it was, we thought a lot about how we could have this conversation. And I think, we still were able to air a lot of we had a few panelists that were pro BDS. But I think it's kind of an issue of how you present that conversation and how you hold that conversation, and how you make space for other people. And so we didn't actually get a lot of hostility around that, which was a little bit surprising. But yeah, when I say interesting, it's varied. We have the JCCV tries to kick us off every now and then for our politics and views around Palestine, and there's some people in the community that don't agree with our politics or our stance, but they support our right to
have them.
Yeah, to have them and to voice them. So yeah.
What is AJDS's formal position? Does it have a formal position? I mean, it's made up of, obviously, it's a membership organisation, and it'll be members with all differing views, but wanting to be a progressive voice amongst Jews and a Jewish voice amongst progressives. Is there a single position?
Position around Palestine?
Palestine, Israel, yeah.
Yeah. No. And I think that's the other, when I talk about having an interesting relationship and being able to have these conversations, is that we don't have a prescriptive policy. We're not pro one state. We're not pro two state. We have been in the past. AJDS's history was very strongly pro two state back in the 80s and 90s. But I guess we find that it's more important to us and potentially more strategically useful to not have these kinds of policies, because it leaves room for different opinions and ideas. And it also leaves people can't attack us for having particular policies, because we don't have those policies. What we do have is a commitment to peace and justice, and that, I guess, looks different to different people, and so it's always a bit of a like you say, we are a member-driven organisation, so even within the core executive committee, there's a lot of different ideas about what that looks like, but it means that we then have those conversations and try and bring it back to what does justice mean in this situation, and also as a solidarity kind of organisation, if we're talking around the context of Palestinians, Israel, Palestine, it also means that we might amplify the voices of Palestinians, as opposed to us having our own kind of no, we're one state and this is how we think it should be.
Now, one of the real challenges now, and certainly we're seeing a rise of it around the world, and you would argue Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu's greatest friend and hard right Zionists' greatest friend, is a rise in anti-Semitism. Do you see that? How is that, manifesting itself in your work? What are you doing around that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's in the last 2 years we've increasingly done more campaigning and more around the issue of anti-Semitism. We've definitely seen a rise in anti-Semitism, and that's, I think, largely linked to the rise in kind of right-wing fascist movements and ideologies around definitely the kind of global north. So yeah, we've done increasingly been looking a lot more at anti-Semitism. We've also seen a lot more kind of violent expressions of that. There was the massacre, the shooting at Pittsburgh Tree of Life Synagogue. So yeah, those kinds of impacts, we definitely feel them. It's not at all pleasant.
One of the challenges is, whilst that is increasing and very real anti-Semitism, I think last week we had some nut jobs up in the near Tatura, right-wing nut jobs put up a Chinese flag and some swastikas because, they're convinced that 5G has created corona and it's the Chinese are doing it, and the only way to get all this is for white power to return. So, the reality of whether it's Orban in Hungary or Trump or Netanyahu, and even the ableism, I'd suggest, of our current Prime Minister, Scotty from advertising, they're enabling this sort of conversation. The same space as you spoke about Pauline Hanson earlier on. John Howard gave her the air to voice those that really dog whistle ugly racism.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that other, I guess one of the very distinctive things about anti-Semitism is that it's I kind of say it's used as a definitional political football, in that people define anti-Semitism in different ways, and there's a very intentional push to do this within various Zionist movements to define anti-Semitism as the critique or attack of Israel and its policies. Mm-hmm. And so the kind of I feel like there ends up being this fight around what is anti-Semitism? How do you define anti-Semitism? And you get, like you said, the Orban Hungarian Prime Minister. He's very close friends with Netanyahu, and there's this kind of political support because he's pro-Zionist, right? But it's
in his election campaign, Yael, as you know, or in Orban's election campaign, he ran a campaign that was anti-Semitic. He said, "You need to vote for me." Soros is, and his left-wing, World Bank are trying to control, New World Order are trying to control the world, and you know what these people are like, and vote for me because we've got to stop their ascent to power. And this is the conversation he's having with his electorate. Wins the prime ministership, and then next thing you know, he's at Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and the Holocaust Museum and wearing a kippah and Netanyahu's greatest mate, yet he's actually an anti-Semite.
Yeah. And I think you can, you can see the same in various other leaders around the world. I would say Trump.
Oh, there are fine people on both sides. You are not a fine person if you're yelling out white power.
Yeah.
Your opportunity to be fine has ceased. But in the challenge, and I think you were trying to get there a second ago, I'll take you back, is in that real anti-Semitism, there's that conflation between Netanyahu and certainly the right hardcore Zionist groups to conflate criticism with Israel with being an anti-Semite. That in fact, I don't agree with Australia's Indigenous policy. I don't agree with Australia's refugee policy. That doesn't make me anti-Australian. It just makes me a human being not happy with my government. And so too, criticism of the state of Israel and its actions, its occupation, detention of children, etc., doesn't make me someone who hates Jews for the fact they celebrate God on Saturday. It just means I hate the actions of the government.
But they have actually been very successful at creating that conflation, as you say. Which makes it it makes it a lot more difficult in talking about anti-Semitism because firstly you have to go back to defining it and having those conversations, and secondly there's a whole lot of issues around it, but it's really it's quite disgusting to call someone standing up for human rights, for justice, for self-determination, to call them racist, to call them anti-Semitic. And I think what that's created is really a kind of backlash of there's now this assumption that if you're called anti-Semitic that it's not true and that it's only used to discredit your politics and who you are.
Yeah.
So there's kind of these a lot of layers of where this where this is fucked, basically, because it does work. It does work to discredit, and we've seen that around the world, and we've seen that in like, like I think there's been increasing numbers of legal cases in the States, for example, trying to shut down action and talk about Palestine.
I mean, you've got states across America legislating, and you get situations. I mean, the hatchet job that was done on Jeremy Corbyn to start with.
Yeah,
recently.
That's another really good example.
Yeah. And then rolls out into Bernie Sanders. A campaign launch. He had a campaign speech. Somebody unfurls a swastika. I mean, there's the challenge when the conflation between proper anti-Semitism, that thousands of year old vile hatred, that conflation is really hurting all of us. It makes everything harder to combat, whether it's Islamophobia or xenophobia, and particularly anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that Australia's got that the United States doesn't have is, and England does as well, Britain does, is strong libel laws. And we know that Melissa Park was hounded out of contesting an election in the last federal election by speaking out for Palestine. And we've had the West Australian and the Herald Sun both print apologies, give her exclusive op-eds, and pay sums. So what's coming up? We're all in Corona lockdown, Yael. What's AJDS's plans for 2020? What you can tell us about, of course, nothing too secret.
I think like the plans for 2020 are rapidly changing. And I think, AJDS has always been in some ways quite a reactionary organisation in that we, when bad things happen, we stand up and react to them. And that's a conversation that we've had for a while, like how much should we be reactive and how much should we be proactive and kind of putting forth more progressive platforms. And I guess you can do both, but what we're seeing now with COVID is we have to change the way that we do things. We have to change that on a daily kind of, we're having this conversation over Zoom as opposed to in person or in a studio. And AJDS is like when I started, I said that I think the best way of describing AJDS is as an activist group, but also a community group. We are very engaged in the kind of local left Jewish community, and we have a lot of community events. And so that, that has this kind of social distancing has a huge impact on that. And we had a Passover Seder kind of celebration on Zoom last week, and it had about 70 participants in that. So that this is the time where we would have kind of gathered and had a community event. We're having to take that online. So there's these kinds of, what are the plans for 2020 is to keep building a strong kind of left and radical Jewish community, and that will look like having more events online as opposed to meeting in person, at least for the in the short term future. In terms of, we in February we had a info night about Ship to Gaza. That was something that we were wanting to work on this year and support this year. The Ship to Gaza has obviously been cancelled, but focusing on what's happening in Gaza right now is something that we're wanting to focus on. The living conditions, I don't even know if you can call them living conditions. There was a UN report, and you'd know this, Nasser, that what came out maybe 5 years ago or something, that predicted that Gaza would be unlivable by 2020. Yeah. It's 2020 now, and I think it's really like Yeah.
I mean, look,
it's time to do something.
Yeah, you're right. It's
past time.
It's past time. You and I and our like-minded friends have known it's past time for a decade, perhaps, and more. But it's past time for the world to take some responsibility and say you just can't cage 2 million people. When the UN has said it's unlivable, 95% of the water's undrinkable, with somewhere between 3 and 5 hours of electricity a day, where people are air, land, sea blockade. It's beyond. It certainly isn't how the world should look in 2020. Let's try and finish on a positive note, Yael. Let's try and finish on a positive note.
Do my best.
Do your best. What's been your highlight of your time with AJDS?
My highlight? Ooh, I have a few highlights.
Okay.
So we could end it on a really positive. I mean, I think the kind of community events that we have, there's a really, I find the AJDS community to be a really strong and resilient and fun community. I'm always inspired by, it's cross-generational, I think we do community really well, and I think in these times I don't see that very often in activist spaces. So that's definitely an upside. And I think just having pushing conversations, whether that's around Israel-Palestine, bringing speakers out, hosting All Illinois last year was incredible. Getting to meet amazing activists and being inspired and pushing the conversations and having radical conversations. And that's not just Israel-Palestine, definitely around Israel-Palestine, but we've held a bunch of panels around decolonization that I think have been really fantastic in exploring and thinking about, thinking that through and in quite kind of radical and constructive ways. That's a few. We had an amazing Purim. So Purim is this Jewish festival, one of the few where you actually properly celebrate. So we had a properly celebrating. Well, it's not like, they tried to kill us, we survived. Yeah, it's. I mean, it is actually like that, but it's a lot more like it's fun and like you go out and you dress up and you eat kind of lollies and drink alcohol. Like it's a very fun festival as opposed to a more solemn, like go to synagogue and this kind of thing. But yeah, we had a really wonderful Purim party just before that might be the highlight for this year, because that was the last time we're allowed to meet in person.
Well, hopefully we get to do it again soon, yeah.
Yeah. But that was wonderful. And so we raised money for Olive Kids in that event. So it was, it was a great event. Everyone had a lot of fun, and also it's kind of, there was this added, like, being useful in fundraising to give money to Olive Kids.
Fantastic. Well, we've been joined by Yael, community organiser of the Australian Jewish Democratic Society. Do yourselves a favour, ajds.org.au, or check them out on Facebook, the Australian Jewish Democratic Society. Thanks so much, Yael, for joining us.
Thank you, Nasser. Thanks for having me.
Now, you just heard from Yael and the Australian Jewish Democratic Society that raised money for Olive Kids during their Purim event. Olive Kids needs your help. As you know, Gaza is in lockdown with dealing with COVID without the support of the outside world or access to the outside world. Olive Kids is seeking to raise $40,000, and specifically this will allow us to deliver 600 hygiene packages to families, 600 food packages, and to give health advice and information to the local community. We'll do that in partnership with our on-the-ground people there in Gaza. Please, if you can spare $1 or some time, go to olivekids.org.au, and help support the Palestinians in Gaza in their time of desperate need. Just a quick note to thank you all for continuing to listen to our show. Tough at the moment dealing with it outside of the studio. Much easier, of course, than anything that the Palestinians are going in, so we'll continue to soldier on. I do hope to be joined by Robert and Yusuf soon enough. In the meantime, please don't forget to go to apan.org.au to join, olivekids.org.au to donate.
Tell your friends to listen to the show, share it on Facebook, share our podcasts, and remember, free Palestine.